In the year 1400 of the Years of the Trees, as the sands of the Third Age ran out in the halls of Mandos, Melkor's term of imprisonment ended. He was brought to the Ring of Doom and knelt once more before the thrones of the Vala. He concealed all the churning hatred in his heart, begging for pardon with the humblest of words. His form was fair to look upon and his speech was persuasive, so that many of the Vala, and even Manwë the Merciful, believed that his repentance was sincere. Thus he was released but was confined to dwell within the walls of Valinor. A free Melkor, like a patient gardener, began to sow his poisonous seeds. In the year 1410 he turned his gaze upon the Noldor. He perceived in them an insatiable thirst for knowledge and craft, and a pride that lay hidden beneath their noble exteriors. Feigning friendship, he generously shared his vast knowledge with them, from the secrets of the cosmos to the nature of matter. The Noldor were enthralled by his profound wisdom, yet did not perceive that in every teaching was mingled a cleverly woven lie. He hinted that the Vala had brought the elves to Aman only to hold them captive, to prevent them from building their own great kingdoms in Middle-earth, and to pave the way for the second-born, men, who were to come and whom the Vala loved more. These lies, like drops of venom, dripped silently into the proud hearts of the Noldor. Meanwhile, the greatest craftsman of the Noldor, Fëanor, Spirit of Fire, was immersed in the most magnificent creation of his life. In 1449, after countless days and nights of study and labor, he created an unbreakable and crystalline substance which he named Silma. In the year 1450, from this substance he fashioned 3 great jewels, and by a secret art that none could fathom, he sealed within them the blended living and holy light of the 2 trees, Telperion and Laurelin. These 3 Silmarils were themselves like living things, shining with a light more brilliant than the stars and warmer than the day, and their beauty filled all the Vala with wonder. The creation of the Silmarils also ignited the deepest greed in Melkor's heart. For the next 20 years he worked ever more diligently to spread his lies. He sowed discord between Fëanor and his half-brothers Fingolfin and Finarfin, painting Fingolfin as an ambitious usurper who sought to seize the inheritance. The shadow of suspicion fell upon the house of Finwë. Tensions grew among the Noldor, and they began secretly to forge swords and armor, an act unheard of in the peace of Valinor. At last, in the year 1490, Melkor's schemes reached their peak. In a heated dispute, Fëanor, his mind clouded by wrath, drew his bright sword and threatened his brother Fingolfin before the royal palace in Tirion. This was a heinous crime in the Blessed Realm. The Vala immediately put Fëanor on trial, and in the proceedings Melkor's lies were laid bare. But when the Vala sought to seize him, he had already vanished, having fled from Aman. For the crime of drawing his sword, Fëanor was sentenced to 12 years of exile from Tirion. Finwë, king of the Noldor, who loved his eldest son dearly, made a tragic decision. He abdicated his throne and went with Fëanor into exile at the cold northern fortress of Forminos, taking the Silmarils with him. In 1492, a tall figure appeared at the gates of Forminos. It was Melkor. He had found Fëanor and sought to incite him to open rebellion against the Vala, promising to help him win back his freedom. But Fëanor, though proud, saw through Melkor's greed for the Silmarils. He angrily rebuked Melkor and shut the gates upon him. Finwë immediately sent word to the Vala, but Melkor had disappeared once more. He crept into the dark lands in the south of Aman, and there he found a being older and more terrible than any other creature, Ungoliant. She was a great spider-like evil spirit, an eternal ravenous void, who devoured light and spewed forth darkness. Melkor made an unholy alliance with her. The year 1495 was a year in which destiny was irrevocably rewritten. In an effort to heal the rift in the house of Finwë, Manwë ordained a great festival to be held on the holy mountain of Tenochtitl and commanded Fëanor to attend. At the festival, Fëanor and Fingolfin reconciled in public, but their truce was fragile and forced. And while all the inhabitants of Valinor were immersed in the joy of the festival, an unprecedented darkness fell. Melkor and Ungoliant, cloaked in a web of unlight that not even the eyes of the Vala could pierce, stole silently to the hill of Azellahar. Melkor pierced the trunks of the 2 trees with his black spear, and Ungoliant thrust her foul beak into the wounds, sucking dry every drop of light and sap from the trees and injecting her venom. The 2 trees withered and died, and all of Valinor was plunged into a sudden, suffocating darkness and silence. Then, like a bolt of lightning, Melkor sped north to Forminos. There he slew Finwë, king of the Noldor, who stood alone guarding the fortress. He was the first elf to be slain, and stole the 3 Silmarils. When this dreadful news reached the festival, Fëanor was driven mad with grief and rage. He cursed Melkor and for the first time named him Morgoth, the dark enemy of the world. Morgoth fled back to Middle-earth with the Silmarils and Ungoliant. On the coast of Beleriand, the greedy Ungoliant demanded that Morgoth give her the Silmarils to devour as well. Morgoth refused and she ensnared him in her nets of darkness. Morgoth let out a terrible heaven-shaking cry, and that sound awoke the Balrogs who lay hidden in the depths of the earth. They came to his aid, drove off Ungoliant with their whips of flame and rescued their master. Morgoth fled back to his ancient fortress of Angband and set the Silmarils in his iron crown. In the darkness of Valinor, Fëanor stood upon the high walls of Tirion. Driven by a twofold grief, the death of his father and the loss of the Silmarils, he delivered the most impassioned and inflammatory speech of his life. His voice burned like fire as he laid all the blame on the weakness of the Vala and the evil of Morgoth. He called upon all the Noldor to follow him to Middle-earth, to take revenge upon the Dark Enemy, and to reclaim the jewels that were theirs. Then Fëanor and his 7 sons raised their right hands and swore a terrible oath, sworn in the name of Iluvatar himself, that they would pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world any being, whosoever it might be, that should take or withhold a Silmaril from their possession. This oath, like a fetter, would thenceforth bind their fate and the fate of their descendants. Ignited by the fire of vengeance, the Noldor resolved to return to the east. To cross the sea, Fëanor led his host to the haven of the Swans, Alqualand, and demanded that their kin, the Teleri, give them their ships. The Teleri refused. And so, in the year 1495, upon the white shores of Valinor, the first and most shameful battle in the history of the elves was fought. The bright swords of the Noldor were stained with the blood of their kin in what became known as the First Kinslaying. They seized the ships and sailed north along the coast. In the year 1496, as the fleet of the Noldor reached the desolate shores of Araman, a tall and dark figure appeared before them. It was Mandos, the Doomsman, or his herald. In a voice that held no emotion, he pronounced the judgment of the Vala upon them, the doom of the Noldor, that those who followed Fëanor would be exiled from Valinor forever. Their road would be fraught with hardship and betrayal, and the oath they had sworn would turn against them and bring them nothing but endless sorrow. Hearing this terrible prophecy, Finarfin and a small part of his host repented. They turned back to Valinor and received the pardon of the Vala. But his sons, including Finrod and Galadriel, chose to continue on, unwilling to forsake their kin of the house of Fingolfin. In 1497, before the Noldor had yet arrived, Morgoth had already unleashed his full might, launching the first battle of Beleriand. The Sindar rose to resist, but in East Beleriand Denethor, leader of the Nandor, was slain. His people were thereafter filled with grief and fear and hid themselves in the forests of Assyriant, becoming known as the Green Elves. The havens of the Falas in the west were also besieged. To protect her kingdom of Doriath, Queen Melian put forth her Maya power and encircled the entire realm with an unseen barrier of magic and bewilderment that none could pass against her will, the Girdle of Melian. In the same year, Fëanor's fleet reached the far north and halted before the Helcarax, the grinding ice that separated Aman from Middle-earth. The ships were not enough to carry all the people, and Fëanor's bitterness towards the house of Fingolfin had grown deep. He made a cruel decision, taking only his own followers across the sea. Upon landing at Loskar in Middle-earth, he ordered all the ships to be burned. Fingolfin and his followers, abandoned on the shores of Aman, saw in despair the red light of the fires against the distant sky. Immediately after landing, Fëanor was ambushed by Morgoth's army and the battle under stars was fought. The Noldor, burning with fresh anger and old grief, won a crushing victory. But Fëanor, in his rash pursuit of the enemy, went forth alone and was grievously wounded by Gothmog, lord of Balrogs. Before he died, he cursed Morgoth 3 times. His fiery spirit departed and his body turned to ash. His eldest son Maedhros took up the leadership, but he was deceived by a feigned parley from Morgoth, fell into a trap and was captured. In the year 1498, Morgoth chained Maedhros and hung him by the wrist of his right hand from a precipice of the Thangorodrim, the great mountains raised above Angband, seeking to force the Noldor to surrender. But the Noldor refused. They made their camp by Lake Mithrim and fell into despair, being leaderless. In Valinor, the Vala did not wholly abandon the broken world. In the year 1500, they took the last silver flower of the withered Telperion and the last golden fruit of Laurelin and made of them the moon and the sun. At the same time, Fingolfin, abandoned by Fëanor, led his people with incredible fortitude and courage on foot across the deadly and despairing Helcarax. After paying a terrible price, they at last set foot upon Middle-earth. Their arrival coincided with the first rising of the moon, and the sound of their horns echoed under its light, striking fear into the armies of Morgoth. The remaining orc armies attempted a surprise attack on Fingolfin's camp, and in the ensuing battle, the Battle of the Lammoth, Argon, son of Fingolfin, was slain. 7 days after the first rising of the moon, the great vessel of the sun rose for the first time in the east. Its unprecedented and glorious light drove away all the shadows of Middle-earth. The years of the trees had ended, and the first age of the sun had begun. It is said that at the very moment the first rays of dawn touched the land, in the far eastern land of Hildorian, the second-born children of Iluvatar, mortal men, awoke. A new age, filled with even more sorrow and joy, had begun.